gentleman here in the checkered, and then right there, and then there. Okay? Go ahead, sir.
This question is for Steve. I know this is a very contentious issue, but I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all, but is it DEQ's position that companies like GP and others that apply for these permits self-monitor and then supply you with that data?
I'm sorry, the question is?
Is it DEQ's general position that companies like GP self-monitor and then supply you with that data?
Yeah, and I understand from the public perspective that sounds like the box watching the hen house. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the way the water quality permit program from the federal level has been established from day one. You know, the reality is no state agency or federal agency is going to have the resources to go around and monitor, you know, all the sources that we have. So we do rely on self-monitoring. There are heavy penalties if they're found to be falsifying records. It's a criminal offense. We have gone criminal against lots of people for falsifying records. You know, they'll just, what we call dry lab, they'll just write down a number. And we go inspect that facility. They have no record of how they came up with that number. So, in part to answer your question, we do routine inspections, typically on an annual basis to these facilities, go through their records, try to, looking at all the information they have, try to determine, you know, are they really monitoring what they're supposed to be monitoring, doing what they're supposed to be doing. And if they're not, you know, we go after them. Oftentimes, when we go out on inspection, we'll have them grab a sample of their effluent. We'll grab a sample of their effluent. They'll analyze it in their lab. We'll analyze it in our lab and see how the numbers, if they match. So, you know, there is some oversight. You know, like I also said, they submit the data monthly, and you know, when you're doing it long enough, you can kind of tell when you're looking at the data if there's something fishy going on. You know, sometimes we'll have somebody will just put in 5, and you're like, come on, you know, these can't be 5 every single day. And so there's, you know, there's certain tricks that you kind of an investigator trying to look for that kind of thing. But not to speak for GP, but for someone like GP or someone in that position, it's a pretty big risk if they intentionally falsify records. So that probably doesn't satisfy a lot of people that they're doing the monitoring, but unfortunately that's the system that we have, and that's the way it is nationally. Great.
Real good. All right, so I got some folks back in the back. Sir, you were next. In the third row right there. Yes. Yes.
Given the length of time it's taken DEQ to review all these permits, takes recommendations. Would it be better to turn that over, since this is the only industrial outfall in the ocean, would it be better to turn it over to the EPA?
If they can have it. No, I don't think we could just turn over an individual permit to EPA. You know, they're either going to take the whole program, or they're not going to take anything. And they don't want the program. They don't have the resources either. So, you know, specifically in this case, it was a pretty drawn-out process, more so than it is for a lot of our permits. So,
for the initial permit or for the reconsideration?
The whole reconsideration process.
Even the original permit, 5 years to review.
Well, you know, and part of that is, if a permit gets expired, you know, we have a 5-year permit cycle, and so there's an expiration date after 5 years after it was issued. If it's been expired, it's still in effect. So, you know, they still have to do everything, and so to some degree, there's not a huge incentive to renew that because it's still okay. And due to resources, you know, we have gotten behind at times on some of these permits and haven't gotten to them in a timely manner. It is something we're currently working on, we're always wrestling with. But there are a lot of outside influences on us. Just this last couple of years, we've had 3 or 4 different lawsuits that almost took the whole permitting program to a standstill because they affected not just a single permit, but they affected so many different rules and standards that, you know, just kind of took us to a standstill. So, you know, we just keep plugging away the best we can and hope to get more efficient as we move along. And the other thing is, as we go along, these permits get more complicated. There's more rules, there's more standards, And of course, in the budget cycle we're in now with the state, you know, the way it is, it's not going to get better anytime soon. So we just continue to do the best we can, I guess.
Okay, so we got up here and then we'll move towards the back.
The Clean Water Act requires the use of the best alternative, the best available technology. And at this time, Koch Industries brings in $80 billion a year in revenue. And they actually make some of the parts that they need to close the loop, which is, new mills in British Columbia already have it like that. So then we could all win, we could keep the mill running, and then we could alleviate the need to run, top to discharge 8 miles with we're on an earthquake, there's so many different places where we can become affected by the waste stream. I'm not a chemist or an engineer, so I don't really know how available the technology is, but I was wondering how much we push for that and how possible, what is the potential to hook up with that?
Question to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know about the technology where you're talking about that Koch's has. They have some membrane technologies, and we've looked into that sort of thing. Bottom line for us is, I think Steve alluded to this before. We operate under a permit, and you have to stay competitive, right? There's other pulp mills in the area that are making the same product we're making. So in order for us to stay in business, we have to be able to market our product, make that product for a certain amount of money, market it at a certain amount of money, and be able to stay in business with all these other mills. So you got to be really careful. If we were to do it, would it put us at a disadvantage to another mill? So those sort of things have to be considered. So we evaluate things all the time, but you're constantly having to look at what is the economics, and then what does your permit tell you have to do.
What is the economics of how much of the deficit is that, and aren't there different brands out now that encourage environmental stability?
Well, I'm more familiar with the sort of economic or tax incentives associated with air pollution control. I haven't been as familiar with things that are for water pollution control. So I know that there's some opportunities out there, say that if you were able to put out aerators into the treatment system. I showed you all these aerators in our treatment system, but put aerators out there that can save you energy, that you can get some grants back for, or some money back for the government for putting that in.
Good job of bringing up some possibilities here.
I first.
No, actually, it was you first. Go ahead.
I would like to know if the Oregon EPA has any plans to increase water monitoring across the state of Oregon for the 85,000 chemicals that are in our environment every year.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are, like you said, thousands of new chemicals. New chemicals come every day. I'm not the expert to answer that. We do have a DE2 laboratory that does our monitoring for us. I can say there is legislative action that was taken in the last legislature. It's aimed more at persistent bioaccumulative toxics, focusing on those pollutants. And those are considered some of the worst pollutants, so we're trying to focus on the worst ones. I mean, there's no way we can monitor all 85,000 pollutants. So I guess, in essence, we've tried to take the worst of the worst and focus on those, and that's kind of where we are right now. And we just, nobody's going to have the resources to. I think your question is almost at a much higher level. Is maybe there's got to be some control over introducing new chemicals. Doing tests on those before you get them introduced into the public.